You're kind of an idiot if you don't use AI, and you're kind of an idiot when you do use AI. We're living in this world where both of these statements are totally true.
What I find stunning is the speed at which AI fatigue has already started to creep in. Sometimes there's mail doing better, and then there was a resurgence of cold calling. But with AI, it feels like the fatigue is set in like 12 months already, or like 6 months.
I think there's starting to be a bigger pressure from the bosses. You stop whining now and you start, showing growth again. I think AI is starting to be this one magic wand that they're hoping that they can hang the hat on in terms of growth again. So if you're checking this out on YouTube, you're seeing that Raul has massively upgraded his setup and is now even wearing a shirt. I think he looks like a management consultant that just flew in from South Africa or the Riviera or something like this, and is having a good time back in Berlin. So welcome you to the show, Raul.
Thank you for the compliment. And I think we are really trying to step up our video game as well. So anyone ever has any comments or feedback, I do see a lot of potential in making this a bit more engaging. Of course, we're still going to stick with like the podcasting.
Yeah. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe either on YouTube or Spotify or wherever. Really helps the show. So let's jump in here. What we want to talk about today is basically, figuring out how to install all of those wonderful AI SDR solutions that you're seeing out there. And we're probably going a little bit broader than just AI SDRs, because it's just the dominating use case right now and everyone wants to talk about it. But the things we're going to talk about are also applicable to some pieces around that. But before we jump into the how-to, why do we even talk about it today, Raul? What's the reason?
VCs are the reason. No, I mean growth in general. So growth, whatever you read on LinkedIn and whatever people tell you, is still possible and is still needed if you're building an early stage company. Or any kind of company even later on. And it's just that the old ways don't work exactly the same anymore. And maybe we're not going to go too deep into what the old ways will be and what the new playbook will be. Spoiler alert, there's something coming for that next week. Yes. But it's more about what can we do now that actually will help us achieve that growth and transition us into the new age. And AI will just be a big tool for that. Now, I don't think that and we'll come to that as well, plugging in and playing AI into the old ways will work exactly well. But there is ways we can do that.
And I think at least from when I talk to folks, both CEOs and founders and also CROs, I think 24 was a little bit of a relaxed pause for some people. Well, relaxed is probably the wrong word, but at least the expectations from the board were a little bit more relaxed in terms of growth, because they were basically sitting in every single board meeting and seeing the shit firsthand from every single company that, hey, things aren't working anymore, right? But I think what's also happening now is that a lot of those board members now sit in other companies where suddenly things are working again, or they're making new investments where things are working really well, right? And I think that expectation is finding its way back into those organizations, right? So CEOs and CROs, while being super ambitious themselves too, obviously, I think there's starting to be a bigger pressure from the bosses to say like, hey, growth needs to come back. And you stop whining. And you stop whining now and you start, showing growth again, right? And I think for a lot of people, not only in those boardrooms, but also in the upper management structures, I think AI is starting to be this one magic wand that they're hoping that they can hang the hat on in terms of growth again. And while this is a super hot space, and just to kind of give you some context, just for the AI SDR stuff, right? We recently talked a lot about 11x and this whole thing there. Like, was this big news or not? Kind of that's a question mark. We just saw yesterday, actually, Hassan stepping out of his CEO role into, a non-executive chairman role of 11x, kind of leading it from, let's just say one level up there. We saw Artisan, also another AI SDR vendor, kind of raising a big round, but from kind of an obscure, I've never heard of them. And maybe it's just me, but Glade Brook Partners, I checked out the founder there. He seems like a legit guy and stuff, but it's all seems a bit like not great for some reason. I don't know. Maybe my VC radar is off or something like this. But while there are big rounds, there's also lots of controversy. So we found a Medium post, which is maybe a bit dated by now. Bart is probably going to pull it up as we're talking on YouTube, but basically it says that comparing a couple of different AI SDR vendors and then basically printed out the cost per meeting that was delivered. And it's pretty stunning. Like, and those results might vary, by the way, but let's just say some of the names we just mentioned didn't come off that super great in that comparison, for example. You know, that's a little bit maybe as a context of all the stuff that's going on in the space and why there's so much interest and focus on this. So obviously this thing is growing. Otherwise, these guys wouldn't get funding from, you know, our A16Z, so Andreessen Horowitz, and, you know, 25 million Series A. That's, you know, regardless from where it comes from, that's nothing to be coughed at. So there's certainly something kind of happening here, right? And what we're also seeing is a lot of people kind of being unhappy too, right? So why is that? It's kind of a really nice conflict. And we want to dig into this today a little bit. Did you, Raul, I'm not sure actually, do you have anything to add on the context window here for this AI SDR field?
So what I find stunning is the speed at which AI fatigue has already started to creep in the prospects. So with the time that I've been in this sphere, maybe 12 years now, there are sort of cycles. So sometimes there's mail doing better, and then there was a resurgence of cold calling. And actually, we are still riding a little bit that resurgence of cold calling. And if I had to bet, it would probably even come back quite soon, in my opinion. But it never wore off that fast. So typically it takes a little bit. People really perfect their game. There's new vendors coming out. People are really stepping up their email game. And when that becomes a bit too professional, people get worn out. And obviously every mail looks the same, super professionalized. And then people go back to the roots and say, okay, let's meet at an event, or let's call you out on a cold call. But with AI, it feels like the fatigue is set in like 12 months already, or like 6 months. I think that's also another reason why it's really time to step up your game and think about how to do that in a way that will really reach these tired out people who are messaged 15 times a day.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of like a weird cursed if you do, cursed if you don't kind of situation out there, right? Kind of you're kind of an idiot if you don't use AI, and you're kind of an idiot when you do use AI, right? Kind of we're living in this world where both of these statements are totally true, right? But let's dig a little bit into this. So kind of the easy part, you know, what most people kind of get easily right. Let's just quickly go through this. So, right. So the AI SDR piece really is just one, you know, let's just pull up the bow tie. If we think about this, it's really just one solution for one part of that revenue funnel, right? Kind of really looking at the bow tie in general, you could see a bunch of different areas where AI could be super awesomely, applied. So Clay, for example, you know, it's now positioned as an AI solution for list building, sourcing, kind of building your account list, basically, out enriching that and, you know, breaking this down to your ICP. That's what these guys are doing. The 11X and Artisan and a couple of other guys then take those leads and, send them messages on LinkedIn and email and so forth, right? Then you have for AEs specific co-pilots that help them say the right things on the call and kind of do the medic scoring live with them. Like I think Winnie AI and Momentum and a couple of guys are doing that stuff. And then you have, you know, things that are helping the support team basically remove a lot of support tickets. I think Cognigy out of Germany, Paloa out of Germany, a bunch of other teams doing that kind of stuff, right? And then there's a wide set of different tools doing all kinds of things across the funnel, right? So while we're talking about AI SDRs today, just be aware that there's a ton of different pieces across the funnel. And I think the first step, and when you're kind of thinking about AI solutions, is like, well, where in the funnel do we have a metric that we're not happy with, or where we think we are overpaying? And we wanna add, you know, some kind of an AI solution to it, whether it's fully automated or just a co-pilot or it helps or whatever the different, parts are. That's we'll get into this in a second, but that's, I would say, is the first step, right? In figuring out where to even apply this thing in the first place.
And to get that off the table, I don't think you're an idiot if you don't use AI, by the way. There are even good reasons now to not do that. And if you found your playbook, it's probably time to keep an eye on that and maybe implement some of that a little bit. But I think the problem is when you just take the old playbook and just plug and play as an AI SDR in hopes that they will just one-to-one or even one-to-more than one replace your AIs. I don't see that working very well, and I've seen that in real life with a couple of companies. I think there's a lot that goes wrong there with the expectations, but also with the way that kind of the project is handled. And in a way, maybe not even thinking about it as a project is a problem in itself. I think what works is thinking about, as you said, what can the AI do to enhance what we're already doing, and not rush in and just like replace people immediately. Yeah. Now, maybe at some point that will happen. I don't know what will happen there exactly. I hope not. And I do think there are still good ways to make a living as a salesperson. So I think what works really well is the idea that the AI enhances the SDR. Mm-hmm. And the companies that I've seen work well, that's kind of the myth or like the ethos that they adopt. And there's use cases for that. But what happens there is that these SDRs actually start producing much more output. And by the way, even account executives too. I think there's too much focus on AI SDRs, but just sales in general, leveraging that on the front can work really well.
And I think kind of just to be super practical, things where the AI is clearly better, and actually it's going to read the handover notes from the SDR or from, all the information on the lead. It actually is going to research a company. It actually is going to do all of these things that you want the SDR and AE maybe to do. It actually does that, right? And I think in these information gathering summarization exercises, I think it's really good. I think where, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, where it sometimes stumbles is like trying to, merge all of this together and create some kind of a unique, ultra personalized reach out, which again, like, is every SDR really doing that either? It's like, it's hard to say, right? But there are a couple of pieces where it's poor, right? I think another thing, especially people are more and more talking about, it's actually not the outbound SDR, it's actually about the inbound SDR. We've been talking about the inbound SDR all along, right? Kind of that's what they're saying right now. And obviously, yeah, kind of that use case makes a ton of sense, right? Kind of the SDR doesn't sleep. So inbound comes in, calls up immediately, and can maybe even have that conversation. Now, what is it potentially not so good at in that conversation? Well, there might be a delay. It's hard to kind of make this super, the voice piece work out, even though they're working on this. Again, right, when you think about what are the features of the AI and how can it help, it's great that it does that immediately. It's maybe not that great yet that it, on the phone call maybe stumbles or kind of is being seen as a robot or something like that, right? Yeah. But once you understand where an AI is better or worse than a human, I think that helps you to make a decision for your business where to place it. Another example, let's just say you have an enterprise motion and maybe you have 100 accounts like globally or something like this. Would you want to apply an AI SDR outbound there? That would make no sense. It would be extremely silly to do, right? But that's exactly how you need to think about it. Where is the AI good? And where can that feature, where can that skill help me in my funnel actually to achieve X, Y, and Z, right? And that kind of, it's the easy part, right, Raul? Kind of, we're almost kind of going into now actually the difficult stuff comes.
So in practical terms, still to really make it graspable. So I'm working with a company right now where instead of saying, hey, the AI SDR, I'm not going to name the vendors that they're using, but instead of the vendor themselves sending the mail and automating everything, we're going to go to 80% of the way with AI. We're just going to have them write the email and deliver me 2 or 3 different suggestions. I will have, as an AI, go through that and have a lot of research being done that would take me a ton of time, that I already prompted it to kind of give me a little bit of research here, give me a little bit of research there, a tidbit on a customer that we could put in there. And then instead of using these, I just use Pipedrive and I have like these sentences that I just copy paste in there for a mail, all of a sudden you get best of both worlds. You get good research, you get a good overview of many things at once. You take the time off of writing every single thing piece by piece, but it writes something already and then you just adjust it for a couple of minutes. And all of a sudden these emails that I've seen are actually really, really good. And it's the same for an AE, right? And you can do that just with the outreach, but you can also do that obviously with an AI that is listening to the calls that are happening, and it's just summarizing. So after the meeting, I have the AI propose to the AE what the email will look like for the follow-up email, and there's like 7 action points and all that stuff, and it summarizes it really well. The AE takes 2 different versions, looks at one, says I'll take option number 1, I'll change a couple sentences, done. Right? Yeah. And it already schedules it in the calendar and everything. That is a game changer to me. And then you don't run into the pitfalls of what AI is just not so good at yet.
And I think to a degree, kind of, this is actually already one of the solutions to where it's not so great at yet, right? So the first thing where it usually breaks is training your AI to achieve something, right? Well, why does it break? Well, because maybe you haven't documented what you're actually doing. So how should it be even learning that stuff? And, let's just say you plug it into your email server, it reads all your emails, and all of those emails are garbage. Then it's, garbage in, garbage out. It's gonna, learn the wrong things from that, right? Or, I've met a couple of founders that basically haven't done outbound emails yet. And then, using AI, and then are disappointed with the results from AI. It's like, well, it's like, that's actually not the job. It's not the job of the AI to figure that stuff out. It's the job to kind of automate that and kind of add a little bit of sparkle to it, right? Those are usually issues people run into. And it's that training piece is, I feel, not fully solved yet by the industry. And it's also the thing that, very quickly happens after we just bought, vendor XYZ and we're plugging them in, and now the honeymoon stops. Because now people realize, oh, wait a minute, I actually need to do all of that additional work for this AI to actually work out. Oh my God, I'm not so excited anymore, right? I think this is kind of the training part, kind of figuring out how do you actually onboard that new employee that you have there. I think that's how people need to think about this.
Love that AI onboarding.
That is just people don't have that on their radar, right? And that's then also when very quickly the magic just crashes and people are like, you know what, actually maybe we're going to churn this vendor.
I love that. AI onboarding, the training part, and to be practical again, different company. What they understood was, hey, look, if we hire an SDR or if we hire an account executive, we will teach them our sales process. Like, we will tell them what happens first, what happens after. We will even let them, and that's part of the onboarding, meet the other team members and all that stuff. And they figured out a way to input that into, and that wasn't actually that difficult apparently, to input that into the vendor AI that they're using. And that became so much better once it understood, hey, this is what happens first. This is the part that I play in this whole process. And this is the part that happens after. They were a bit skeptical because I talked to them about that before they did it. They were a bit skeptical if the AI was going to understand that. And it turns out it did. Well, the results were much better once it understood that that call will be then handed over to someone and it needs to record this and this in such and such fashion. And they even went one step further. They said, hey, look, the data that you input into Salesforce will then be used in this and that way. And you as in AI SDR, might have to follow up on that later. So you're going to use that same data.
Yes.
That became such a wonderful tool if they just thought about, I will just treat that AI just as I would any SDR and onboard them correctly.
And I think this is also, then the next step. And I think the human onboarding analogy kind of still keeps working out here, where you then go like, okay, so we have this new SDR onboarded for a week and a half, or I don't know, a day and a half, whatever. Should we now allow this new SDR to blast out 1,000 emails on day 2? And the answer is no. No, you shouldn't. Like, that's stupid. You wouldn't do this with anyone. And you shouldn't do it with AI either, right? So really kind of this is the AI trust building phase, right? Kind of, and we're seeing this kind of in active kind of the business that I'm building kind of is the same thing. Kind of you interact with the agent, you get the analysis, you get kind of the output, and there's a trust building phase that needs to happen. That's true for any AI product out there, right? And I think what you mentioned earlier, and that's why I didn't want to kind of jump there immediately, is actually one of those solutions. It's basically kind of seen as the human in the loop, right? So the AI now, the AI SDR, either for an SDR or an AE, kind of suggests you a couple of options of like what to write next, right? And it kind of removes this blank page problem, from those people. Gives you a couple of options, then you paste this in, then you maybe add it afterwards, right? You have the human in the loop basically, and then you hit send. And this is the first step. This is kind of how you build trust, right? Kind of and ideally the AI learns from those edits and from those choices that you're making. And then over time, maybe after a week or a month or whatever, all the E's go like, no, actually this is the option. I don't need to change anything of this anymore. And then if that, this is then the point where people have adopted the AI, they understand, is fully onboarded, it totally gets it, and people trust the AI. And at that point, you can maybe take the next step and kind of leave the co-piloting behind and just say like, hey, go do that stuff on your own right now, be a fully, full agent or whatever we're going to call it. But that's kind of the evolution that people kind of don't think about, I feel. think that, hey, all of this is magic. Why doesn't it just, work out of the box? And then get disillusioned and so forth, right? And if you get that part right, I think a lot of those AI SDR vendors might actually have better gross retention metrics than they're currently having.
Here's a genius thing I heard about 2 weeks ago, and obviously you're a genius, so you have thought about it already. I haven't,
Of course.
and my mind was blown. So I went out to lunch with a SaaS founder, around 5, maybe 7 million ARR, about 2 weeks ago. And they're really, really keen on tackling this. And I think they were doing this the right way to some extent already. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, man, if I'm going to hire SDRs and I have a fast growing company, I might hire 5 SDRs at once. And then I'll see who works out, and hopefully I'll retain all of them, but some won't work out. And that's just the name of the game. I'm doing the same with AI. So what I'm doing now is I'm just hiring 5 different vendors at once. They're still in the process of doing that. They went through the onboarding process just kind of as they would with hiring a new class of 5 SDRs. And then they're just seeing what works and what doesn't. And obviously that's a little bit difficult in the negotiations and everything, and with the demo phase. So there are some challenges he talked about there. And then even one thing that he can imagine is that they will just use 3 or 4 different ones depending on people's preferences of working with it. So it might be that kind of there will be a team of Tony likes vendor A, and he will be an account executive using it that way. And I'll be using another tool because that just works better for me. And so in that way, he really goes to the extreme of seeing it as an SDR. But just this idea of, hey, as simple as it is, I haven't thought of that. Well, let's not just choose one vendor after 2 months of negotiation or something, and let's just not log in for like a 1-year deal already. Let's just use 5 at once for a month or 2, and then just see who works out and keep the 3 that work.
So I think that sounds kind of interesting, for 1 second, and then you put your revenue ops brain on, then you see the nightmare kind of emerging there.
Yes.
But like even the, and I think this was one of the things we also wanted to talk about, right? Kind of even the project management around just that is difficult, but all the other stuff too, right? Kind of what are your experiences on that actual role?
So this is the same founder, and this is why I think that he will succeed with that, is he's seeing this as a project. And that is a very different kind of mindset to, I'm just plug and playing this tool in just as I would an SDR. Meaning that there's a lot of work that comes in the onboarding part with that. There's a lot of work that comes in with getting the documentation up to the right stage. And then there is also steps and expectations. He even talked about something as a fully ramped AI SDR, which also blew my mind because it's the same idea. Hey, we'll take some time for that thing to be there. So they have milestones for that SDR to achieve. They have milestones for the different tools, and they have milestones for the projects. And they even have someone, in that case, the RevOps manager, to manage that project in budget, time, and scope, meaning there needs to be something achieved within a certain budget, a certain time frame, and with a certain scope achieved. And also following project management best practices. There are stand-ups that are happening where people are going through what's working, what's not working. There are daily tweaks and daily new releases and daily changes happening. There is alignment with different departments, most of all marketing, but also customer success, and a little bit of product as well. And there's all of that kind of makes it a real project with a project manager and has a much better chance of succeeding. Yeah. And they also have a very fixed time frame when they know that they will have it kind of done, or when they will choose the best ones or not so good ones. This costs them a good amount of money. But with the ROI that they might get from that if they do it the right way, as opposed to you just blowing 5K on a random vendor every month, I think they're actually looking much better than what people are doing out there right now.
I think so too. It sounds also like it. And kind of this reminds me of one story. This is back in the old days where you bought tools like SalesLoft and Outreach. At that point, we had 60 SDRs. We finally bought a tool like this. And we were like, we just, plug this in and then we go. It took us 6 months to roll out because we realized that across those 60 SDRs, we had, 5 different teams and all of them had a different process. So we had to do a lot of work to align that stuff. And I think the same thing is kind of still true and happening here. The problems are a little bit different. The way to solve them is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, it's a vendor that you plug in that can help you immensely. But you need to put in some work for this to kind of really, deliver the results for you. Before we forget, so we were talking about AI SDRs. And we actually also wanted to talk to someone that, knows that stuff extremely well. So we had Jacco van der Kooi on the show. We talked to him about this whole thing. And he is really kind of a big advocate on like thinking about the old playbook and the new playbook. And while Raul and I were preparing to actually talk about the old playbook, Jacco just blew the whole thing up, plot twist. And we're like, guys, you're thinking about this completely wrong. Let me tell you the new playbook. We're not going to be spoilering or teasing more, but that's the episode next week. So if you don't want to miss it, hit that subscribe button and then, enjoy the show with Jacco coming up. But otherwise for today, Raul, I think that's it, right?
Sounds great.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for listening and watching, hopefully. Hit that subscribe button and then see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you, everyone.